We've gone through the course requirements. Course. Then we jumped right in to a moral dilemma, the trolley problems that we discussed. Now it was a thought experiment. Not very many people are planning on working for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and they didn't really feel like it was a moral dilemma that was going to confront them in their lives. But they got an idea of what a moral problem is, what an ethical problem is. We then turned to just the question of what philosophy is, trying to explain what philosophy is, how it works. And now we're going to kind of follow up with a little bit more detail of what ethics or moral philosophy is about. And we're really going to follow the article that I asked you to read by William Franken. It's actually the beginning of one of his books on ethics. It's reprinted in a couple places, and he makes some very good points. And here he's going to talk about a real ethical dilemma. And here's what we're going to be going through. First, we're going to talk about another moral problem, one that's presented by the character Socrates in Plato's Crito. Many of you have heard of Socrates. If you think of the big names in ancient Greek philosophy, where Western philosophy got started, Socrates would certainly be a name that comes up. It was Socrates, his student Plato, and Plato's student Aristotle. Now, people wonder, why was Socrates so well known? Well, he must have written a lot, correct? Actually, he was not the author of anything. In fact, he didn't think that that was an appropriate way to do philosophy. But rather, we know about Socrates, who's an actual historical figure, from the writings of Plato and some other philosophers and some other Greek authors. Playwrights, Aristophanes, for example, had a whole play about Socrates. And he's well known because Socrates was put to death in 399 BCE, before the Common Era, for doing what? For studying philosophy. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a while, but we're going to talk about the moral problem that confronted him. Then we're going to talk about Socrates' approach to solving moral problems, because the interesting thing is there was philosophy before Socrates. He was not the first philosopher in ancient Greece. There was a whole tradition dating back several hundred years. But Socrates is the person with whom the character of philosophy that we see today really takes shape. And we're going to see what his approach to solving moral problems is, because I think it's going to be helpful for us in approaching ethics. We're going to look at a couple of arguments that he gives for the decision, the very tough decision that he makes. And from that, we're going to follow Franken in trying to sort out the characteristics of a moral argument. What makes a moral argument? Then we're going to move on to a slightly different but related topic, and that is to really define what about ethics, what about morality philosophy studies. And we're going to make a distinction between descriptive studies of morality, which is not what philosophers study, and moral philosophy. And moral philosophy was divided up really into three major components. One is sometimes called normative ethics or ethical theory. Another set of questions, metaethics, and usually there's no hyphen between it, but I didn't want you to put it together and think it's like metaethics or something like. It's metaethics, questions about normative ethics. And then there's a whole subject that's become very popular in the last, let's say, 20 to 40 years, called applied ethics. And we'll explain what these three different kinds of philosophical studies are. And then briefly, I'm going to talk about perhaps what some of the values of studying ethics or studying moral philosophy are, what the value is of studying moral philosophy.